I was 5 years old when my world split in two. One moment, my mother was there, her laughter echoing in the kitchen as she flipped pancakes, her hands warm as they smoothed my hair before bed, her voice soft and steady as she hummed lullabies that made me feel safe. The next, she was gone. A tragic accident. They said in whispers, their voices hushed and heavy with pity. I didn't understand what it meant at first. I only knew that she never came home. The days that followed blurred together. Our house, once filled with the comforting hum of everyday life, became unbearably quiet. I remember sitting on the living room floor, clutching my stuffed rabbit, watching my father stare out the window unmoving. His silhouette looked different, hollowed out by grief in a way I didn't have words for. He was only 23, too young to be a widower, too young to bear the weight of raising me alone. But from the moment she was gone, he never let his own pain stand in the way of being my father. He worked long shifts at the factory, coming home with grease-stained hands and exhaustion clinging to his shoulders like a heavy coat. But no matter how tired he was, he never failed to sit beside me at night, book in hand, reading stories in a voice that never wavered. Sometimes, I would press myself against his side, feeling the steady rhythm of his breath, anchoring myself in his presence. At night, I was afraid to sleep alone. I would wake from bad dreams, my chest tight with a panic I couldn't explain, and tiptoe down the hall to his room. Without a word, I'd crawl under his blanket, curling into his warmth. He would sigh softly but never protest, just pull the covers higher around me and place a hand on my back, rubbing slow, soothing circles until my breathing evened out. The first winter after she was gone, I got sick. A fever had settled deep in my bones, and I remember drifting in and out of restless sleep, my body aching and my head too heavy to lift. Through the haze, I felt the damp cloth on my forehead, the warmth of strong arms lifting me, carrying me from the couch to my bed as if I weighed nothing. Even in sleep, I knew it was him. He stayed by my side, wiping sweat from my brow, whispering gentle reassurances. I woke at one point to find him sitting on the edge of my bed, his fingers brushing lightly over my forehead, his face drawn with worry. "You're okay, Liv," he murmured, his thumb pressing lightly against my temple. That was the first time I saw tears in his eyes. But even then, he never let them fall. As I grew older, I began to understand more about grief, about sacrifice, about how much he had given up to be both father and mother to me. I noticed the way he never brought up his own sadness, how he never spoke of the things he had lost. Instead, he poured all of his love into making sure I never felt the weight of it. On my first day of school, when I clung to his hand, afraid of being left behind, he crouched down to my level, pressing a quick kiss to my forehead. "You've got this, Liv," he said, his rough palm cupping my cheek for a moment before he let me go. And I believed him, because he had never let me fall before. Every birthday, every scraped knee, every school recital, he was there. Even when he was exhausted, even when life must have felt unbearably hard, he never let me see anything but his unwavering love. Some nights, I still woke to the sound of him moving through the house long after I had gone to bed. Sometimes I peeked through the door and saw him at the kitchen table, his head resting in his hands, a framed photo of my mother sitting beside him. I never went to him in those moments. I never needed to, because in the morning, he would wake me with a warm hand on my back, just like always, and we would start again. We had lost so much, but we had each other. And in the quiet spaces of our little home, in the unspoken love that filled every corner, I knew that was enough. 17 felt like standing on the edge of something vast, something unknown. College applications, career choices, the idea of leaving. It was all coming fast, faster than I was ready for. And through it all, my father stood beside me, just as he always had, steady and unwavering. He had aged over the years, though I doubted he ever noticed it himself. The dark hair I used to grab onto as a child was now streaked with silver, his once boyish face now carved with the quiet lines of responsibility. But it wasn't just time that had changed him. It was the years of hard work, the relentless weight of putting me first. I saw it in the way he rubbed his hands together when the cold settled deep in his bones after a long shift. In the way he stretched his back with a quiet groan before getting up from the couch. In the way his shoulders hunched ever so slightly, carrying burdens he never spoke of. But despite everything, he was still him. He still woke up early to make coffee, still asked about my day with genuine interest, still ruffled my hair even though I pretended to hate it. With my 18th birthday only days away, I found myself watching him more, realizing how much of himself he had poured into raising me. I remembered every small sacrifice, how he had skipped meals so I could have enough, how he had stayed up late to help me with homework even after grueling 12-hour shifts, how he had never once let me feel like I was missing something, even though I knew he had. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table finishing an essay, I glanced up to find him watching me from across the room. His gaze was warm, filled with something I couldn't quite name. Pride, maybe. Or nostalgia. "You've grown up so fast." He didn't say it, but I could feel it in the way he exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of his neck as if trying to process the reality of it. Later that night, when I passed by the bathroom, I caught a glimpse of him in the mirror, standing in front of the sink. His hands rested on the edges of the counter, his reflection staring back at him. He looked tired. More than that, he looked like a man who had spent the past 17 years giving everything he had to one person. I stepped forward and wrapped my arms around him from behind, pressing my cheek against his back. He stilled for a moment, then let out a quiet chuckle. "What's this for?" he asked, his voice low and amused. I didn't answer. I just held on a little tighter. There were so many things I wanted to say. How much I appreciated him. How I saw every little thing he had done for me. How I was terrified of stepping into adulthood without him as my anchor. But the words felt too big, too heavy for that moment. Instead, I reached up and kissed his shoulder lightly, a quiet thank you that didn't need to be spoken aloud. He let out a deep sigh, his hand coming up to rest gently over mine. "You'll always be my little girl," he murmured after a pause. And even though I was nearly 18, nearly grown, I let myself believe him. I blinked against the soft morning light filtering through my window, stretching beneath the blankets. The house felt still, but there was something in the air, something familiar yet special. 18. For years, I had counted down to this day, imagining the freedom it would bring, the feeling of stepping into adulthood. But now that it was here, I didn't feel any different. If anything, I felt something else entirely, something heavier, something bittersweet. I slipped out of bed, my feet meeting the cool wooden floor, and padded down the hall toward the kitchen. As I approached, I could hear the faint clinking of dishes, the quiet hum of the coffee maker. It was a normal morning, yet somehow it wasn't. When I stepped inside, I paused. The table was set with care, 2 plates, a steaming cup of coffee placed exactly where mine always sat, and in the center, a bouquet of deep red roses. My breath caught slightly at the sight of them. Standing by the stove, my father turned just as I entered, a warm, familiar smile spreading across his face. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I felt something tighten in my chest, an ache I couldn't quite put into words. This day wasn't just a milestone for me, it was one for him too. The moment he had spent 18 years building toward. The proof that everything he had given up, everything he had sacrificed, had led to this. Without thinking, I stepped forward and wrapped my arms around him. His warmth surrounded me instantly, the steady rise and fall of his breath familiar beneath my cheek. He smelled like coffee and fresh linen, like safety. His arms came around me without hesitation, holding me close, and I could feel the soft exhale he let out against my hair, as if he had been waiting for this embrace as much as I had. When I finally pulled away, I saw it, just for a second, the glint of emotion in his eyes. He nodded toward the table, where a small, neatly wrapped box rested beside my plate. I took a slow breath before reaching for it, my fingers brushing over the crisp ribbon. Carefully, I untied it, lifting the lid with quiet anticipation. Inside, nestled between layers of soft tissue paper, was a dress. A deep red, smooth and elegant, the kind of thing I had admired from afar but never thought to own. My fingers ran over the fabric, my throat tightening. "You deserve something special," my father said simply, his voice steady, certain. I swallowed hard, my emotions too tangled to put into words. It wasn't just the dress, it was everything it represented. Every long shift he had worked, every meal he had put on the table, every moment he had spent making sure I never felt the weight of what he had given up for me. Setting the dress down carefully, I turned back to him. Then, without hesitation, I stepped forward and pressed a kiss to his cheek. It was quick, fleeting, but full of meaning. A gesture I had done countless times as a child, something I had all but outgrown. But today it felt important. Today, it felt like the only way to say everything I couldn't put into words. His lips quirked up in a small, surprised smile. He let out a soft breath of laughter, shaking his head slightly. 18 years, and you still surprise me, he murmured. I met his gaze, my chest tightening with something deep, something unspoken. Thank you, I whispered. His expression softened, and before I could pull away completely, his rough, calloused hand reached up, brushing a stray strand of hair behind my ear. His touch was gentle, familiar, full of the same quiet love he had always given me. Happy birthday, Olivia, he said quietly. And as I stood there, with the warmth of his touch lingering on my cheek, with the roses sitting between us and the quiet hum of morning wrapping around our little home, I realized that no matter how much time passed, no matter how grown-up I became, I would always be his daughter. As the afternoon faded into evening, the house was quiet. I sat on the edge of my bed, running my fingers over the red dress, feeling the soft fabric beneath my fingertips. It was beautiful, carefully chosen, and more than anything, it felt like a gift that carried meaning beyond the material. It was a reminder of everything my father had done for me, of every sacrifice, every late night, every quiet moment where he had put my happiness above his own. The sun had just begun to set when a gentle knock came at my door. I turned, watching as my father stood there waiting. He didn't need to say anything. There was something expectant in his expression, something proud yet bittersweet. I rose to my feet and slipped into the dress, smoothing it down before turning to the mirror. The reflection staring back at me felt unfamiliar. The girl I had been was still there, but now she carried something else, something softer, something deeper. A quiet understanding of what today meant, not just for me but for him. When I stepped out of my room, I found him waiting at the bottom of the stairs. The moment his eyes met mine, something in his face shifted. He studied me for a long moment, his gaze full of unspoken emotions. Then, after a brief pause, he stepped closer. His hand came up, fingers brushing over my shoulder, then down my arm, a fleeting touch, steady and warm, as if grounding himself in the moment. Outside, the air was crisp with the lingering chill of evening. The sky had deepened into soft shades of blue, streetlights flickering to life as we made our way to the car. The drive was quiet, the hum of the engine filling the space between us. I watched the world pass by through the window, my thoughts tangled in the weight of today. The restaurant was warm and elegant, the glow of candlelight reflecting off polished wood. A small flickering flame danced between us as we sat at our table, the soft melody of a piano drifting through the air. The atmosphere felt different, heavier in some ways, but comforting. This was a moment we had unknowingly built toward for years. As we ate, he reached for his drink, pausing briefly as if caught in a memory. His gaze softened, his expression shifting in that familiar way it always did when he thought of the past. I could see it then, the images flickering through his mind, the quiet nostalgia settling in his chest. There was a moment where he looked at me, really looked at me, as if seeing not just who I had become but every version of me that had come before. The child he had carried in his arms, the girl who had clung to him in quiet moments of grief, the teenager who had grown too quickly. And now the young woman sitting before him. A warmth spread through my chest, slow and steady. Without thinking, I reached across the table, my hand settling lightly over his. His fingers curled around mine in a gentle squeeze, the touch saying all the things words never could. As the evening drew to a close, the weight of everything settled between us, not heavy, not burdensome. Just there, lingering in the unspoken love we had always shared. When we stood to leave, he reached up, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear, his touch light, familiar. Then, as I stepped closer, he leaned in, pressing a kiss to my forehead. A quiet blessing, a silent acknowledgement of everything this day meant. The ride home was peaceful, the kind of silence that felt full rather than empty. The streetlights cast long shadows along the road, and as I stared out the window, I realized something profound. Today had been a milestone, not just for me but for him. 18 years of love, sacrifice, and quiet strength had led us here. And as much as I was stepping into something new, I knew that no matter where life took me, I would always carry this: the warmth of his hand, the weight of his love, the quiet certainty that I would never be alone. The house was quiet when we returned. The warmth from the restaurant still lingered in my chest, a soft glow that hadn't faded even as the cool night air wrapped around us. The drive home had been peaceful, the hum of the engine and the faint rhythm of passing streetlights soothing in a way I couldn't quite explain. Inside, everything felt the same, yet different. The same furniture, the same framed photos lining the walls, the same scent of home that had wrapped around me since childhood. But tonight, there was something new in the air, an understanding, an unspoken shift. I walked toward the living room, drawn to the familiar comfort of the couch. My father followed, moving with the same quiet presence I had always known. He reached for the old photo album on the shelf, the one I had flipped through countless times as a child. Without a word, he placed it between us, his hand resting on the worn leather cover for a moment before he opened it. The first pages were filled with early memories, baby pictures, sleepy smiles, tiny hands clutching onto his fingers. I traced the edges of a faded photo of the three of us, my mother's face frozen in time, her eyes filled with a warmth that still echoed in the home she had left behind. The pages turned slowly, revealing the years that followed. My first steps, my first birthday, the small moments that had once felt ordinary but now held the weight of an entire lifetime. As we reached the more recent years, I noticed the quiet shift in his expression. His fingers brushed over a photo of me at 10 years old, sitting on his shoulders, my arms stretched out like wings. Another at 14, standing beside him with my first school award, his pride unmistakable even in the faded ink of the picture. He had been there for all of it, every scraped knee, every late-night fever, every heartbreak I had thought was the end of the world. He had carried it all, silently, steadily, without ever asking for anything in return. A lump formed in my throat, and I blinked hard, pushing back the wave of emotions threatening to spill over. Without thinking, I shifted closer, leaning into his side the way I had done as a child, resting my head lightly against his shoulder. For a moment he didn't move. Then, slowly, he reached up, his hand settling against the back of my head in a quiet, familiar gesture of comfort. His touch was steady, warm, full of the same quiet love that had carried me through every year of my life. The clock on the wall ticked softly, marking the passing moments. Neither of us spoke. There was no need. After a while I sat up, turning to face him. The emotions pressing against my ribs felt too big to contain, too heavy to let sit unspoken. I leaned in, pressing a kiss to his cheek. It was brief, but in it was every unspoken thank you, every ounce of love I didn't know how to put into words. He exhaled softly, his eyes closing just for a moment, as if memorizing the feeling. When he opened them again, they were softer than I had ever seen them. As I stood to head upstairs, I felt the weight of the evening settle over me, but not in a heavy way. It was warmth, a quiet certainty that no matter how much changed, no matter how far life took me, I would always have this. Pausing at the staircase, I glanced back at him one last time. He remained on the couch, flipping through the pages of the photo album, lost in memories that belonged to both of us. With a small smile, I turned and made my way to my room, the events of the day swirling in my mind like the last whispers of a dream. I had stepped into adulthood today, but as I curled beneath my blankets, listening to the faint sounds of the house settling in the night, I realized that in the ways that mattered most, I would always be his little girl.